Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Coach Better Coach Talk. These series now have been going on for a couple of months with some interesting guests, and then tonight we're very lucky to be joined by a coach who's currently out in the US, working at first team level in the USL, with an incredible background of various different countries, various different cultures, various different clubs. The only thing that's followed you around, Dom, is success. So, welcome to Dominic Casciato. Delighted to welcome you, mate. Been trying to get this sorted for a while after seeing so much of your work and getting to know each other. So excited to hear more about what you're doing now and your journey to this point. Welcome, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. Glad to be here.
And I can imagine it's a busy time at the moment. I know you had a tough one on Saturday, and you've got another one coming on the weekend. There's no respite at the moment, so we appreciate you fit this in.
No, no worries. No worries. No rest for the wicked, as they say. We played San Antonio last Saturday. We're top of our side of the Western Conference. And then this Saturday, we have Louisville. We're top of the Eastern Conference. So we've got our hands full for sure. But
Could have been the worst time. Well, look, I think everyone's interested to hear about your journey really to this point because, like I mentioned at the start, working in so many different countries, so many different cultures, and so many different roles within that to get to where you are now and on the path you're on. So, without going back to probably the playing days, but what would be an overview of your career to date, mate?
yeah, where do I start? So I've been coaching for 12 years. I was a pretty average player. I played in the Conference South for Carshalton Athletic as a teenager, and then came over to the US to play and study on a scholarship in South Carolina. And then I guess what really kind of planted the coaching seed in me was the two coaches I had in South Carolina. I had a guy called Eric Allsop, and Ben Shepherd was the other one. And Eric was our head coach, and he kind of developed me as a person and matured me and helped me to grow up. And then Ben helped me a lot to develop as a player. And they both kind of had a big impact on me and made me think of coaching as something I could do in the future, as a realistic profession. I'm sure you had somebody, somewhere along your journey that did the same for you, Mark. And then I graduated when I still had the dream to be a player, right? Like we all do. So I went back to play a little bit in Iceland and in England, but wasn't really happy with the level I was at or the money I was earning, right? It wasn't what I dreamed of when I was a kid. And shortly after that, I got injured, and it turned out to be a real blessing because I was chasing a dream that was really turning into a bit of a nightmare for me. And I just felt free after getting injured to go and do something else. And, a lot of coaches will say, I was a top youth team player and would have been a top player, but then I got injured. Like, that wasn't me. I just want to make that clear. That wasn't me. Maybe would have played League Two, potentially League One if I was really lucky and worked really hard. But I think that injury was really the making of me. And although I kind of felt liberated after getting injured from playing, I quickly realised that I love football too much to leave it completely. And I had a wonderful opportunity to become an assistant coach at a university team in New York, St. John's University, just outside of New York City. So while I was there, I did a master's degree and also worked with the men's soccer team. And I got to learn a lot about other American sports through my studies. And I also got to work with a fantastic coach called Dave Mazer, who opened my eyes to what real attention to detail was. And in those 2 years with him, there's a lot of things I picked up that stuck with me and I still use 12 years later. From there, I worked alongside a good friend of mine, Jeff Mateo, at a USL League Two team called the Jersey Express, where we had great success. Won the league, promoted a lot of guys into the MLS. I guess the most famous mark is Matt Turner, the goalkeeper who's just signed for Arsenal from New England Revolution. I had nothing to do with that, by the way. That was all to our goalie coach. And then while I was working for Jersey Express, I also worked for a company called the Parisi Speed School. So at Parisi, they train athletes from different sporting disciplines to be faster, stronger, more agile, and jump higher. And at the time, Parisi trained athletes held all of the records in the NFL and NBA combines for sprint, agility, jump tests. And I was a slow centre back, right? So I wanted to go there, and I thought I was pretty good technically and tactically. So I thought, I could go learn the methods from Parisi, learn their methodology, and then help somebody, who was me, right? A technical or tactical player, but someone that was physically limited. And again, the stuff I learned at Parisi, I still use to this day. So from there, I had the opportunity to become a technical director for a real famous club in America called the Brooklyn Italians. And you and I were just talking before we went online about Sacramento in the Open Cup. They've reached the final, which is great. But Brooklyn Italians won the Open Cup on 2 separate occasions, but had a real robust youth program. When I went in there, I made a conscious effort to work with every age group because I'd only really coached players in the professional development phase, or from maybe like 14 or 15 and upwards at that stage. So I went in and I was like, I'm going to coach everyone because I feel like there's a bit of a gap in terms of my own development as a coach. So I coached the under 7s, I coached in our rec program. I coached kids that wanted to be a dinosaur rather than play football, kids that wanted to roll around on the grass and pick daisies rather than kick a ball around. So I feel like I filled in a lot of gaps in my development when I was at Brooklyn Italians. But then I also ended up coaching their first team, which played in the NPSL, which is America's 4th tier. And, Brooklyn Italians is a club for immigrants, and Brooklyn itself is a very diverse place. So while I was there, I learned to work with people from all different types of backgrounds. And I think I really learned how to relate and connect with people from all walks of life. We had some great success there. But after 3 years, I felt like I wanted to get out and challenge myself. Yeah. And I knew I was, pretty decent young coach. But I wanted to learn a language and see how I would do in another country that wasn't as culturally similar to England. Obviously, in the US, it's the same language. A lot of the customs are the same. And the idea for me was, all right, I've just worked for this Italian immigrant club in New York. I should go to Italy. I'm from an Italian family. I spoke a little bit of Italian, but wasn't fluent. So I was kind of thinking, maybe I'll go to Italy and try my hand over there, but didn't really have the courage to make that jump. And then one day, my girlfriend, she sat me down and she said to me, look, I've been accepted onto a master's course in Barcelona. And are you coming with me, or are we going to end this now? So she put it on me a little bit and got me on the back foot. And the more I thought about it, I just couldn't resist going to Barcelona. So I gave up my job and a visa to be in America. Didn't speak one word of the language. Everyone thought I was crazy. I had no job lined up, no money coming in. Didn't really know where we were going to live, nothing. So it was a huge risk, but looking back, it's probably the best thing I've ever done. And in the 2 years I was there, I actually became fluent in Spanish, which is quite an achievement for someone who's still struggling with English, Mark. And I ended up working for Espanyol, which was brilliant. Worked in their academy, and obviously you're in the shadow of the biggest club in the world, right? And I learned so much from the staff that had been there for years. They were just so resourceful and creative. The work they did was just excellent to be able to punch above their weight at academy level, year after year. And then after a couple of years there, I got a great offer to come back to New York and work with the New York Cosmos. Obviously a real historic club. Definitely. I'd go and watch their training sessions when I was at Brooklyn Italians, and the club captain at the time when I would go and watch their training sessions was Carlos Mendez. And Carlos was the head coach who invited me to go and be kind of his assistant. And then unfortunately, shortly after I came into the Cosmos, COVID hit. So we had one season and the club went out of business, and I was really deflated because I felt like I was just starting to get somewhere, and then the rug was pulled out from underneath me. So I was unemployed, wasn't sure what to do, maybe go back to coaching kids or work for an academy. And in that time, I kind of applied to work with FC Midtjylland in Denmark to become a remote video scout for them. And went through an interview process, and was given a job, which has been brilliant. I report directly into Christian Kaya, the head of recruitment, right, and been able to learn about how one of the most forward-thinking clubs in the world approaches their scouting. And I think that fits in with kind of my long-term goals of trying to become a technical director one day as well. So that's been fascinating. And shortly after that happened, I got a full-time job with El Paso Locomotive. The head coach at the time, Mark Lowry, approached me about coming to be the in-possession coach for the first team. And they'd been to 2 Western Conference finals the 2 years before I arrived. real strong team, good players, and it was a role that I couldn't turn down. I was able to do the Midland stuff alongside the stuff of El Paso. We had a great year last year. We won our league, and then Mark decided to leave. But I decided to stick around as I thought I could learn a lot from the new guy coming in. And I guess that's proven to be a pretty good decision so far. So yeah, that's kind of the last 12 years of my life wrapped up in about 10 minutes. In our facility, they have access to everything the first team has access to, and they have that pathway into our first team. But not just our first team, because of the club's mission statement. Obviously, the end goal is we'd love them all to get in the first team, but it's obviously unrealistic.
Yeah.
We can help them get a scholarship to go and play football at a college where their education gets paid for, or a large part of it gets paid for. And we have some strategic partnerships with different colleges across the country to help make that happen. And then obviously, education is not for everybody.
Yeah.
So for people that are not good enough to get into our first team, maybe they're not educationally inclined, we try and help them get meaningful employment, whether that be with an apprenticeship in a trade, or coming to work for the organisation in some capacity in the stadium, or coaching within our youth club. We try and make sure that there's free avenues for all players coming through that under-19 group. And then I mentioned earlier that we've kind of taken control of our games program. And the reason we've had to do that is we're really geographically challenged. We're in the desert. We're kind of isolated from everything else. El Paso is almost like living in Mexico, just with American infrastructure. And the closest USL Championship clubs to us are New Mexico United, that's 4 hours away if you drive, and Phoenix Rising, which is 6 hours away. And just the distance is just too much, right? To go and play games like that every weekend, it's just too much for parents, players, coaches. It just puts too much of a strain. It's going to be too expensive. If we wanted to play against MLS clubs, it's even further. So Austin and FC Dallas, two MLS clubs based in Texas, it'd be 9 hours to get to Austin in the car and 10 hours to get to FC Dallas in the car. So then you're looking at adding in overnight stays, hotels. The cost just becomes ridiculous. So I looked at this and I said, well, we're right on the Mexican border. Who can we play over there? Rather than driving 4 hours for a game, who can we play in Mexico? And obviously I told you about our relationship with FC Juarez. But then there's also two third division clubs just over the border. And getting across the border takes us probably door to door, from, pick up at the training ground, getting through security, crossing the border, to arriving at the stadium at one of these clubs. It's maybe half an hour, right? So you can be home by lunchtime if you play in the morning. So the level is very good, especially at FC Juarez. And we'll go over, we'll play their under 20s, their under 18s on a regular basis. And we'll also play against like very good local men's teams in and around El Paso. We're still in the USL Academy, so we do travel more for those games. And we will go to tournaments. We'll go and play against colleges as well. But if you look at last year, where we had maybe 12 games with that under 19 group, this year we've had 30 games already, and the aim is between 40 and 50. So we're well on track to get there by November, by the time our season ends. And one thing we're actually doing when the Mexican season ends is we're going to have a little mini league with those three clubs and two other Mexican clubs. So we'll have a mini league that runs from mid-October until the middle of December. And we're just kind of taking ownership of that games program in the same way that Brentford B does. And that's kind of where I got the idea from. And it's been great so far. Obviously, still early days. We've had 5 debuts from our academy so far, and there will be more to follow. But we just sold Diego Luna, one of our players, to Real Salt Lake of the MLS, and that was a record transfer fee between the two leagues. Diego wasn't one of our own. He came to us from a different academy. But I'm pretty sure the next one we sell will be one of our own. And we're just looking for more of these moments. Hopefully you see the video playing on screen. One of our academy players recently scored his first goal for us, sticking it in the top corner. And, yeah, so we're hoping that we can have more of those moments and then sell more players into the MLS or overseas.
Yes, and look, I think there's massive pat on the back that very easy, isn't it, in this industry to just follow the traditional route. Join the league that you should join, train as much as is suggested. It sounds like you guys have looked at the problem and then found a sensible solution based on what you think your players need to give themselves the best chance to play at the highest level.
I think so, mate. And I think if you look at, a player's journey, I think they need all different types of experiences. And if you look at the games program that we've provided, our lads will play against younger players than them, older players than them. They'll play against players that are much better than them when they play against Warriors' under-20s. They'll play against players that are not as technically good as them when they play against the local men's teams, but physically they've got to compete a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think having such a diverse games program has really been the reason why I've been able to get 5 lads in the first team in the first 6-7 months of the program. And I think you can tell from my story earlier in terms of my journey as a coach, that was always been someone that wasn't afraid to try something different if I thought I was going to get better as a coach from doing it. And that's kind of the approach I have with everything that I do. And the same with this academy. When I first presented it to the club, there were people saying, oh, you should be playing more league games, or you should be, competing for things more. And I'm thinking, well, really what matters is that these kids have a great experience while they're with us and that they have a pathway when they leave us. And we still get competition by playing in the USL Academy and going to play in tournaments. But I think that's diverse games program. We're really fortunate, based on our location, that we've been able to take advantage of that. And I think the kids would tell you the same thing. I think the kids love going into Mexico and playing those games.
Okay.
And, I can't think there's any other clubs in the US that have a better games program than us.
Yeah, definitely. And I can imagine stylistically there's that different experience as well. Having played against Mexican teams in the past, you're certainly very different to particularly a European type of feel, and same as US really. So great experiences for the players. And what's been the sort of outcome, the next steps from there then?
In terms of end goal for the players, like signing pro
Yeah,
deals,
so
or
I think probably. Do you think this is a model you're going to stick with? Has there been enough signs of success to be, yeah, we're going to grow it and really stick to this?
I think so, mate. I think so. I think we've had 5 debuts so far this season in the first team. Some of those players will be offered professional deals very shortly. And then outside of those 5 debuts, I think we've got 6 lads who are going to take college scholarships at different universities around the country. And then there's been 1 or 2 that we've kind of helped find jobs outside of our academy now that they've aged out. So I think the proof is in the pudding that it's been working so far. And I think whether I'm here or not, I'd love to think that the club would continue with this, because it's fulfilling that mission statement, right?
Yeah,
It's helping create opportunities for those young players in and around El Paso.
yeah, brilliant. And how's it'd be great to talk about the philosophy really, and how I suppose the first team look to bring those lads in and how that all glues together. So I'll leave you carry on. I'm interrupting a lot here. We're keen to
No, it's
learn
fine.
more.
It's fine. I think, look, just touching on that, Mark, before I carry on with the presentation, I think we're really fortunate to have a head coach like John that is willing to throw young kids in. And I think you can be the best young player in the world, right? But if no one's willing to give you an opportunity, then your talent is going to be wasted.
100%.
So, I look at some bigger clubs that have great academies and obviously great talent there, but if your pathway is blocked, then what are you doing at that club? I think all young players need to get out and play and add value to themselves. So I think John, obviously being willing to play players, has been a huge part of that. If I move on just to talk about our kind of player development model. All the individual development stops, and it's all about winning on Saturday. And I'm a believer that you've got to win on Saturday, right? And I think you should work towards winning on Saturday. But all players within our club have an individual development plan, whether they're 36 years of age, like our oldest player, or whether they're 16, 17, and they're just breaking into our first team. So they all have an individual development plan. I'll show you an example of one of those in a second. But before I do that, I'm just going to talk about this image here with the eggs. And I don't want to make you think of your breakfast there, Mark. I want you to imagine that the egg is a footballer, all right? And the egg on the left, the one without any cracks in it, that's a top player, right? That's best of the best. He's got no cracks. And then the egg on the right, that's a bad player. He's broken like the egg is, right? But the reality is that no player is perfect, right? Every player looks like the one in the middle with a crack in it, okay? But coaches, like, we often expect players to be perfect and not have any flaws, but that's just unrealistic. People will say to you, Ronaldo and Messi, right, the two best players in the world. Well, Ronaldo doesn't defend, or Messi won't head it. And then if you had those players when they were young players and you focused on what they couldn't do and you tried to fix them, you'd lose what they were great at, right? So for me, the key is understanding which cracks in the player's makeup are important to fill and which ones can be ignored, right? Because if you spend your time focusing on things that don't matter, you just make the player average and he'll end up cracking like the egg on the right. And obviously I'm talking in metaphors here, right? But when I say cracking, it means, all right, he's not going to progress to the level that maybe he could have done if you address the right cracks in his game. So I'm going to give you an example now about a centre forward who maybe needs to improve his first touch and his link play. So here you'll see a sample individual development plan for one of our young players. And with all of our players, with their IDPs, we give them things to continue doing, things to stop doing, things to start doing, and then we give them a specific goal to work towards. We'll also give them some highlights of a top player to watch in their position, and then we'll just give them grades in kind of in possession, out of possession, transition, and mental skills. And what I want to focus on here, and I'm going to show you some videos in a second, is for this player who's a centre forward, he needs to improve his first touch, particularly receiving it when he's got pressure on him from behind. And then we want him to attack the box more aggressively and make runs in behind when midfielders have got time on the ball. All right, so if I click through here, I'm now just going to play a video, and this is just a generic warm-up. If you focus on the red circle in the middle of the screen, you see you've got two lines of players. One player with the ball is just going to pass it to the player opposite him, and then his job is to sprint at that player to put pressure on his first touch. He's not trying to win it, he just runs straight towards him. And then the receiving player just shifts the ball into the space. So if I play the video, hopefully that's playing. But as I play it through, you'll just see the player just shift it into the space, okay, out of the way of the pressure, and just working on his first touch. Now, I think any player can improve their first touch, right? I think this applies for everyone. Obviously, I'm talking about a centre forward here, but I'm going to show you one or two generic things that we'll do to work on that first touch. And then we'll do stuff where, we want players to be comfortable receiving the ball under pressure. So within the same setup, now, rather than taking a first touch and beating a man as he approaches you, now you're just going to wait for him to make contact with you, right? And are you good enough? And are you confident enough to take the ball under pressure and find a way out? So here you see in that middle screen again, people using soul rolls, inside hooks, outside hooks, just to escape pressure and find a solution to being under heavy contact. So this is generic stuff that we'll use, but then, if we're talking about that centre forward, we'll then go into things that just make it more specific for him. And this one will work on receiving from behind. So exactly what it said in his IDP program. On the screen, you'll see me in the light blue shirt, pressing the centre forward from behind. And then you've got two servers, okay? And basically what's going to happen is the server's going to play in to the player as he checks towards it. And I'm just going to press him from behind. Okay, so to begin with, they're going to play in on the ground. He's going to receive at different angles. I'm pushing and pulling and just making sure there's contact there as he's on his way to the ball and as he receives it. And this is just about making him more comfortable receiving the ball in a game when he's got a centre-back breathing down his neck. All right, and then we'll progress it so the ball's clipped in, okay, in the air. Sometimes it'll be you know, a little chip. Sometimes it'll be driven in real hard. Sometimes they'll volley it into him, just mix up the type of service, but always with me pressing him from behind, giving him contact, challenging that first touch. And then the last one we'll do will be kind of where we bounce it into him. So a little bit more unpredictable. Obviously, he's got to read the flight of it, read the bounce, and then pick the right body part to control it with. So I'm doing this actually with our main number 9, Lucho Solignac, who's played in the MLS. And it just shows you that this stuff applies for, you know, young players and experienced players. And as you know, Mark, you know, centre forwards always want to go to the goal. So we'll just finish the warm up with him setting it off to the opposite server. And then after he sets it, he's looking to run behind, right? So again, it feeds into that IDP that we were speaking about. And then from there, I guess where we get into the meat of the session is taking that specific thing that we needing to improve on, and we use it in a competitive situation. And then we'll also try and add in elements of our game model into these exercises. So one thing from our game model is attacking the front post. That's one of our principles when the ball is wide. The front post is important for us because obviously you can score there if the cross arrives there, but then also you're probably going to drag a centre back out of position if you run there, and that just creates space for somebody behind you. So here on this screen, you'll see there's a player on the ball. There's a centre forward facing him, and then there's a centre back on his back. All right, and what's going to happen is the server is going to play into the centre forward. He's going to bounce it back to him, and then when he bounces it back to him, he's then just going to open up, and the server can play into the space or he can play into the player's feet. So whichever way he does it, if he plays into his feet, he's taking 2 touches to finish, and then he's going to go and attack across. So he's got to get across that mannequin at the front post, get across the centre back, okay, and then try and finish first time on the cross. So just to give you an idea of kind of how we develop training sessions to give the players what they need. So we spoke about that centre forward needing to improve his first touch and his link play. And then what we need is for him to attack the front post. Right, we need him to attack those areas when we're crossing. And players tend to respond really well to these type of exercises. If I move on to the next one that we've got, this is basically the same setup, but now we just want to develop a willingness and a confidence in the centre forward to turn under pressure. And what you'll notice, I guess, with all the attacking drills I'm going to show you today, is I always try to include multiple finishes on attacking drills, and that's the shape mentality, right? I think attacking players need to be eternal optimists. And when I say that, I mean, you know, they could miss 100 chances, but they've got to believe they're going to score the next one that they get. So they've got to be resilient and they've got to focus on the next opportunity after they miss one. And I think having 2 or 3 finishes when you're doing finishing drills helps to develop that mentality. So in this drill here, as I mentioned, the setup is the same. If you just watch where the red circle is about to pop up, okay, centre forward, man on his back. But this time when the ball goes in, he's just going to spin, turn and get a shot off real quick. And then again, he's just getting across that centre back at the front post to finish at the front post. So again, something for the player, improving his ability to turn and shoot, take the ball under pressure, confidence in his first touch to turn. And then something for us where we need him to attack the front post, either to score himself or to create space for somebody in behind him. And then another thing that we work on with attacking players, and this kind of feeds into that IDP that we spoke about in terms of running behind when someone's got time and space on the ball. I like to call it a trigger, response, and then technical execution. So one trigger for our centre forward is when someone has their head up and has got time on the ball, he should generally be looking to run behind. So the trigger is the head up and time on the ball, and the response is running behind from the centre forward. Obviously, the technical execution is the finish that they decide to use from within their toolbox of skills, right? So once they're in a position to finish, do they bend it? Do they blast it? Do they pass it? Do they chip it? So in this exercise above, what you're going to see is there's 2 players where the white arrows are, and they just pass back and forth 1 touch, okay? When one of them takes a touch forwards, there's 2 players there that are just going to open up, and the player on the ball, he can play to either one of those 2. The player that receives it, he's then taking a touch to go and finish. The other player that is not passed to, he goes to press him. So now we're working on that forward finishing under pressure. You'll see here as he takes a touch, he's being closed down, but then he gets a second ball to finish, right? Because we want our forwards to win second balls and to run back when we lose the ball. So they'll get a second ball to finish on some small goals that I'll feed in, and then they go and attack across together. Again, one attack in the front post and one attack in the back post. So I'll just let that play through 1 or 2 more times so you can see it. Here you see one front post gets a toe poke on it and finishes. Okay, again, as he... What's that? Exactly. And the players love to compete on this stuff. Um, yeah, so it's again, multiple finishes. We want the players to be resilient and always think of the next action. So this is a little bit about how we tie in individual player development with team training sessions. And then I'll move on now to talk a little bit about session design. So obviously I've given you a taste of... Yeah, a lot, a lot. I think at the start of the season, we sit down with all of our players. We obviously have an idea of what they need to improve on or what they're really good at. And then we just ask the players what they think they need to improve and what they think they're really good at. Because sometimes it can be very different to what we see, right? So I think it's just trying to get some alignment between how the player perceives himself and how we perceive the player. And then what I would stress is, like, it's not all about just ironing out any creases in the player, right? Working on weaknesses. It's about focusing on things that are going to make him better in his position. So that might be if someone's got a really good first touch, turning that into a great first touch. And if someone's good at attacking the front post, let's make them great at attacking the front post. Right? So turn skills that they already have into super skills or super strengths, rather than just focusing on what players can't do all the time.
Yeah.
Because if you're focused on all the negatives, I think you just make players average rather than being really good in 1 or 2 areas.
Yeah, it makes sense. No, I've probably got the next follow-up question will be answered here around where does it fit into the session? Because I can imagine as a coach and a manager, you're always wrestling with, what's going to get you results on a Saturday.
Yeah,
And sometimes individual development can be pushed to the back with things like work on set plays, defensive organization, offensive organization, even physical work, because it's just maybe perceived as a quick fix to help you get a result on a Saturday.
yeah.
So yeah, it would be great if you could share with us really how you integrate that into the overall session planning and the game model.
Yeah, no, I would love to. Hopefully, this section of the presentation covers it. And if it doesn't, maybe we'll end after this section and then I'll open it up and address that a little bit more.
Perfect.
But basically, when we're designing training sessions, the first 2 things that I look at are what are our principles and what is our identity? Like, who are we as a team? What are we trying to be? What's our style, right? Before I think about the opposition. But we do have to consider the opposition, right? Who are we playing against? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What things do we need to consider? And then from there, I always want to make things competitive because I think that motivates players. You want to make it realistic, right? So it's linked to the game. And then finally, you want to make it enjoyable, right? I think players need to enjoy what they do. Like, we've all been around coaches that make life miserable. I'm sure some of our players will say I can be pretty miserable at times, but I think you only get the best out of people when they enjoy what they do. And I think if the coach is enthusiastic and enjoying his work and he puts on sessions that are enjoyable for the players, then the players are going to enjoy it as well. And that's something I really do believe in. So what I'll talk about now is our defensive principles. Obviously showed you a bunch of attacking stuff there. So the next few clips I'm going to show you will be based around defensive exercises. And I think one basic defensive principle that everyone has is pressure and cover, right? If you and I, Mark, if we're 2 centre backs and I go to compete for a header or I go to press a ball, you're expected to get round me, right, and cover. That's a generic one that everybody knows and I think uses. But then one principle that's specific to me and our game model, I guess, is marking in the box. Right, this you can argue about and have a difference of opinion with, but I'm a strong believer in marking men in the box, and the reason for that is, I don't know about you, Mark, but I've never seen space score a goal. I've only ever seen players score goals. So I want to mark players. I don't want to mark space. So that's one of our principles. When teams are crossing, we make sure we mark in the box. And then once we do clear the ball, we want to get out of the box. So getting our line up, making sure that we can avoid the other team getting into the box where most goals are scored. I think that gives us a great chance to not concede goals. So what I'm going to show you now is an exercise where I kind of put all three of those principles together. Right, so this is just focusing on us and our game model. Right, this doesn't really take into consideration the opponent. So I'm standing at the top of the screen there in the light blue shirt. There's two centre forwards in the orange bibs, and they don't move to begin with. All right, behind them are two centre backs in blue. And how it's going to start, I throw a ball for one centre back to head, and he's going to kind of head it to the side or over the centre forward. And the other centre back, while he's going to head it, the other one is getting round him to cover. Right, so we continue like that with me throwing the ball kind of randomly, 4 or 5 throws, and then a ball would be played wide out to a winger or a fullback to cross. Okay. When it arrives out with that winger or fullback, the centre forwards are now live. Right, they're sprinting into the box to the attack across, and then the centre backs have got to track and mark those centre forwards as the cross comes in and try and clear the ball. Once they clear it, they then have to get out of the box as quickly as possible and block a shot from me and the other assistant coach. So I'm going to play this through. Hopefully it's clear enough. I'll just kind of talk through as we go. So here I serve the ball, and as I do, one centre back is heading it, the other one is just on the cover, as you can see there. And then I'm just going to repeat that, right? So they're moving, they're getting up and head it, and this is difficult physically, Mark. You'll know that. So you develop physically, you're developing tactically, you're obviously working on the technique of heading it. And now we want to mark in the box, right? So you see the oranges running in, and you see the blues marking them. And our guy at the front post there stays with his man. The guy at the back post lost his man a little bit, but we're able to clear it. And now we want him to get out of the box. And the reason why we want to get out of the box is if we stayed where that ball was cleared, I think it was cleared right about the top of the 6-yard box, and that ball comes back in. If we don't win the header and the centre forward heads it from on top of the 6-yard box, we've got a great chance of scoring. But if we're out of the box, right, and say we're at top of the box, yeah, there's a line there, we can all see it. If we're there where the players are now, okay, and the centre forward wins the header from there or volleys it from there, it's got to be ahead of a volley or ahead of a header to beat our goalkeeper. So that's one of the reasons why we want to get out of the box and make it more difficult for the forward. Okay, just let this play through one more, just give one more example. Okay, there he does enough to put the centre forward off, and then they sprint out of the box, and then they just block a shot, and then they get their rest after that. So physically it's demanding. I think tactically, obviously reinforcing some of our principles and basic defensive principles, and then technically working on, technique of heading and clearing the ball from across. And then in terms of adjusting our principles or taking into consideration a specific opponent, Mark, I know you do some work with the guys at San Antonio, and I won't talk about them this year, but last year a large percentage of their crosses had been scored from low crosses, flashed across the face of goal. So we're scoring a lot of goals that way, and I'll show you a couple of examples here. They're in white. They had very fast wingers who were usually faster than the fullbacks of the opposition. So they were to beat players down the outside. On this occasion, I think it's a cutback. Okay, a little bit of magic in the box and then able to finish. But they were getting, close to the byline, getting crosses across like this that led to simple tap-ins. And they almost scored against us. This last clip you're about to see, this is actually against us. We played them earlier in the season, and somehow they managed to miss from that situation. So I always think it's quite powerful when you can show teams, look, they nearly hurt us through this. We really need to be switched on when we're working on it. So we know they want to score with low crosses. We know that's a weapon for them. But we want to mark in a box, right? That's one of our principles. So how do we react to our fullback being beaten by a faster winger who's going to flash across the face of goal? So here, what you're going to see in the exercise, we just tweak one of our staple exercises, is there's going to be a winger on the right-hand side of the screen. I'm going to feed him. 2 defenders are sprinting back, and then there's 1 centre forward in between them who's just trying to get there and tap the ball in. So we still want to mark in the box, but it's a bit of a race, and we just want to work on those clearances from a hard ball that's fizzed across the face of goal. So this is just how we'll adjust for playing against San Antonio from last year. And then after the game, I always think it's important to reinforce belief in your methods so that the players buy in to you as a coach and your ideas, right? Because professional players are always looking for opportunities to believe in you. And I think you've got to take those opportunities to build credibility and belief in yourself. So after the fact, I mean, you know that, Mark, right, from your time in the program. So after the fact, if things have worked, and they don't always work, right, but we can show players clips and we can say, look, we knew that their low crosses were going to be a danger. This is what we did in training, guys. This is how you did in the game. Brilliant. And then the next time you say, look, guys, we have a new exercise that we're going to use to counteract something, you know, the players are maybe even more in tune to it because they've seen that the proof is in the pudding. And it's helped them win a game, you know. Okay, so just some clips here of how we dealt with those low crosses in the game against San Antonio last year. And then just moving on from there, again, I'm going to continue to focus on the defensive stuff. And sometimes what we'll do with players is we'll show them an animation of how we're going to press, right? And this is just hypothetical. But here we want to show if the opposition is in red, playing with a back 5 or a back 3, how they like to play out and how we press. And I think what happens a lot of the time is, you know, coaches, we can work on pressing, but we forget the purpose of pressing is to win the ball back, but then you want to win the ball back high so you can go and score, right? So we show our winger, all right, when it goes to the right-sided centre-back, we want you to jump. And then we show when the 2 number 6s are going to drop to try and help build. Our 10 and 8, we want you to squeeze on them, jump to them, try and win the ball back. Okay, so when we design these sessions, you know, it's not natural for all centre forwards, especially at our level, or all wingers, to want to be real hungry pressers, right, and go and win the ball back. So I always like to think, okay, if they're going to press, let's reward them for pressing with a finish. And then again, give them multiple finishes so we can build that mentality that I was talking about. So here what you'll see is it's me actually as the middle centre-back. It's one of our other assistant coaches as the right centre-back. And then we've got 4 mannequins in just to replicate the shape that the opposition are going to be in. So as it plays through, you'll see that I'm going to play to the right centre-back. The left wing is going to come and press and steal the ball from him. Once that ball is stolen, the players as a 5, they then combine, go and finish on the main goal. And if we just pause the video here, what you'll see is balls will get played in from the side on the left and the right there. Balls will get played in for 2 players from either side just to go and finish. And then as that happens, right, I'll feed in a second ball for that group to recover like a second ball and then go attack again as a group of 5 on the main goal. Again, this time we've actually got, you know, the whole back 3 in. I think it's our kit man is in now. It's me in the middle again. I'm going to play to the left-sided centre-back. And then this time he's going to try and punch a pass into one of those mannequins of replicating the position of the number 6. And our midfielder is going to pick it off. And it's exactly the same thing where, you know, we pick the ball off, we go and counter-attack. And then once we counter-attack, you know, you've got 2 extra balls coming in, 1 either side. And you'll get a second ball in to attack centrally again. Okay, and then I guess last but not least, Mark, when we're playing against the opposition, right, obviously, you know, we'll look at 3 to 4 games of each team that we play against. And in one game this season, we noticed that the goalkeeper was spilling a lot of shots and giving up a lot of rebounds. So I created an exercise where the players react to a rebound before attacking across. So reinforcing our principles while adjusting to the opponent. And we actually went on to score a couple of goals in the game through rebounds. So I'm not going to take all the credit for it, but I like think that maybe this helped. And what you're going to see, and this one is a little wacky, so bear with me, is there's two goalkeepers there laying on the ground. One is laying to the left, one is laying to the right with his hands extended. And then I'm in the middle in the light blue shirt. So I have a ball, and then there's two players kind of behind me to either side. They're going to compete against each other. And what's going to happen is I'm going to play a pass into those goalkeepers. I'm going to play into one of their hands, and they're just going to pop it out like a rebound. And when they pop it out, those two players behind me, they're going to react and try and finish the rebound. So they're competing against each other. Once they do that, so there you see, good finish. Once they do that, one's got to get across the front post, one gets to the back post. Okay, and then they just attack across together. So goalkeepers don't love this one, if anyone's thinking it. But they're normally pretty good sports, but the forwards do tend to really enjoy it. And I think, although it's not totally realistic, right, because you wouldn't have two goalkeepers laying down in the 6-yard box, I think it does simulate that reaction and being alert in the box really, really well.
Into the behind the scenes, not just actual footage, but the thinking process. So I suppose I noticed that it feels to me like a lot of your sessions they start with the end in mind. Really, it's these are the objectives to be achieved. Let's create a plan that allows us to hit. Be a fair assessment.
I think so. And I think when we first start coaching, I think everyone is kind of in a copy and paste stage, right? Like you'll see a coach that you like, and you'll be like, "Well, I like that. I'll use that." You don't really know why you're using it, right? You don't really know why you're doing it, and it might work. It might be great. The players might get a lot out of it, but you don't really understand why you're doing what you're doing. And if I go back in terms of my own coaching career, when I was at Brooklyn Italians, I had a wonderful assistant, a guy called Jorge Nicora, and Jorge was from Spain, and he was just brilliant in terms of exercise design, making things tie up with the game, and kind of what you're talking about, right? Having the end in mind.
Yeah.
And working with Jorge, he really opened my eyes to what creative session design looked like. And really, that was part of the inspiration for me also to go to Spain, right? I was like, well, if Jorge's this good and he can't work for a top pro club in Spain, how good are the guys working at places like Barcelona and Espanyol and Madrid? So a lot of that comes from there. And I think with time, I've got better and better at that, and have a real kind of clear process now in my head about how I want to develop things and where I want to get to with it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think for a lot of the coaches out there as well, it's nice to see that although some of the practices are probably quite consistent and maybe a basic setup, just by tweaking even, and you made light of it, the goalkeeper creating a rebound situation, suddenly like you're reinforcing those behaviors that you want to get on a Saturday and still linking it into that individual development plan. So it feels like
Yeah,
that training block has got, the practice very much speaks for itself. Look, guys, we've done this before, which helps, I suppose, the players get to grips with it quickly, understand how the practice works. But then by some really clever conditions, positioning of mannequins, different service, you're getting various different outcomes based on what the opponent or the game model is.
yeah, I like to think so. And listen, it doesn't always work. I'm not perfect by any means. There's times where I may start something and it's not quite right, and we have to adjust. But I think for any coach, right, like with experience, it becomes easier to adjust, and you learn how to be flexible. If something is not quite working, you learn how to move it and adjust it. But I think we're in a good spot now where the players really respond to the exercises. Sometimes the players will come to me and say, "Hey, Dom, what about doing something like this?" And then I'll come up with an exercise. Or sometimes the players come to me with an exercise, and then I'll tweak it and we'll deliver it. So I think it's a collaborative process for sure. And I think it's probably the bit I enjoy most, looking at our position, saying, okay, how can I tie in our principles with their weaknesses or their strengths, and make sure that we're ready for Saturday.
And then, as you know, with us at Coach Better, we're adding that digital support with clubs. And then what would be the support in terms of, reinforcing that? Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, if we do something well, reinforcing it. Would that also be on an individual basis as well? Would you also be clipping up individual bits in the game and training sessions to reinforce that, hey, look, look at the work we're doing. This is where you were 3 months ago. This is where you are now. Would that be a process that you and the coaching staff are going through at the club as well?
Yeah, that's something I lead for the club, making sure that we're feeding back to the players when they're doing well, if they slip a little bit as well. And then we'll do a lot of video kind of one-on-one or in small groups positionally, where we'll go over elements from our game model and our principles. But then a lot of the stuff in terms of the IDP plans that we spoke about, that'll all be delivered on a kind of one-to-one basis.
And then I know you've got the role with the 19s as well, and obviously the club have got an academy beneath, and you've given us an insight into the defensive side of the game model. How would you try and align that? Because I can imagine a club like yourselves, like, that identity being clear from when the kid first comes into the academy, right the way through now they come to that 19s model, which is near full time in first team. How are you managing to get that alignment?
It's not easy. It's not easy. There's been a lot of turnover within the academy. As I mentioned earlier, I was kind of part-time with the academy last year. I was just doing 2 training sessions a week and then sometimes a game on the weekends.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, with it being a full-time program, it's a much heavier lift. And, last year I was part of a team of 3 coaches. This year I'm the lead assistant to John. So I actually don't have time to, spend with the academy. I only really work with the academy players now when they come into our environment.
Yeah.
So all I do for the academy now is I manage their games program. So I set up the games room. And then obviously I'll talk with our academy director, our head under 19s coach. I'll go to the games and just make sure that players are on track. We actually just hired a new academy director as well. So just trying to get him up to speed with everything is obviously really important, because then he can drip down to the other teams in the club, making sure that John's message and what we value as a club and as developers is being fed down to everybody.
Yeah. And last question, mate, 'cause I'm conscious this is absolutely flown by. Always does watching football. The game model. I always find the game model interesting because there's obviously like the different schools of thought in that you've got, this is my game model, and wherever I go, my game model follows me. The game model of, it depends on the players completely. So if I work with a group of players who are very technical and enjoy the ball, we're going to play a possession-based model. But if my next club is full of guys who very much qualities against the ball, we'll flip it completely. So how did you and the manager come to a conclusion that this is our game model, and how fixed is it in terms of, I mentioned I know you adapt for the opposition, but how did you come about creating that game model? Was it a balance of your own philosophies and the players' qualities? But just good to get some insight into, you turn up at a club, a little bit of identity, but you want to put your own mark on it. So how do you guys create those principles?
I think it's a really interesting question, and I think it's a debate that we could have another hour talking about, Mark. Right? Whether you're pragmatic and you're able to adjust to the players you have, or you're dogmatic and you say, no, like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and you guys are going to get on board with it. I think that's a dangerous path to walk down, because if the players reject it, or you don't have the players to execute, your ideas or your model, probably not going to be at that club very long, right? Because you won't get results and the players won't accept you. I think I was really fortunate when I first came to El Paso, and I worked for Mark Lowry, as I mentioned. Mark and I had very, very similar ideas about game model and how the game should be played. And I think that's what allowed me to really hit the ground running when I got here. I think Mark's ideas were just way more developed than mine. He'd been a head coach for a long time, despite being a young guy. Then when Mark left, I think there was a lot of uncertainty around, what's the new coach going to want? Because last year we were the top possession-based team in the league.
Yeah.
But then thankfully the club, made a good appointment with John, someone who values possession, obviously some tweaks and some differences to it. But I think there was some alignment in terms of how Mark wanted to play and how John wants to play. I think John realised when he came in, he obviously works at a real high level in Japan. There's maybe some things that he had to adjust to the players and the different type of players that we had. But after a bit of a rocky start, I think he's done a real good job of adjusting that and getting things back on track, and making sure that how we want to play, yes, he's happy with it, but then also it suits the players and we're able to get results.
Yeah, no, it makes absolute sense. And clearly there's a real sense of clarity, identity, purpose, and still linking the game model to the club mission right at the start. It feels like you've embraced the culture of the town and the surroundings and everything about the club, and that reflects itself on the pitch. And then last question this time, mate. I always think it's a valuable one. Given that your playing background wasn't professional and didn't probably give you that footstep in the game to get into coaching, what would be your advice based on your experience to a 19, 20-year-old, maybe 25-year-old player who is thinking, I really want to get into the coaching space? What would be your sort of top tip and advice to them?
It's a great question. I guess I was a little bit different because I'd signed a professional contract but never really played. So I was a little bit different in that I had some contacts who could help me, get in and, watch training sessions and things like that. I think getting on the grass as much as possible and training everyone. Don't think that you're above training anyone or coaching anyone. I think working with different groups of players, different abilities, different ages is really, really important skills to acquire for your toolbox. I also think just being open to ideas, being open to meeting people and talking with people. I think a lot of coaches, and you'll know this, Mark, that sometimes coaches can be a little bit arrogant and think they know everything, right? Or have all the ideas or look down their nose at somebody who's working at a lower level. And I would just encourage people to always have an open mind and not fall into that trap, because you can learn something from everybody, even if it's what not to do. That would be my advice. Kind of stay hungry and stay open to learning.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, I think your journey has also highlighted that capacity that got to take some risks, got to be brave. Like, I still go back to that. Jumped on a plane and go into a country where you can't speak the language, it's a super experience. And I think that for a young coach, it's such good advice to get out there, try things, and as you articulated so well, mate, take some risks and stay hungry. So look, I think I owe you a massive thank you on behalf of everyone listening, all the team at Coach Better and myself, because as I've repeated probably a few times, it's very rare you get an insight in terms of the methodology, the thought process. We obviously see the outcome. We watch the game on a Saturday and we see the end result of the performance, but very rare we get a sneak peek at the training ground and, more importantly, the thinking behind it. So really can't thank you enough, mate. I'm sure everyone listening has taken loads from that. And obviously over time, more and more people will get a chance to reflect on this. And I'm sure some of those practices and ideas will be helping coaches all over the country, all over the world, to develop the players they're working with. So on behalf of everyone, mate, huge thank you. Thanks so much.
No, thank you for having me, and hopefully everyone took something from it.
Yeah, for sure. No, well, I definitely did. And I suppose it'd be remiss of me not to wish you all the best on Saturday. As tough a game as it is, having seen you guys work and heard more about it now, I'm sure you're in for a great rest of the season and get yourself back towards that, pushing for that championship. So best of luck for the rest of the season, mate. And as a company, and we're delighted and we're looking forward to staying in touch.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. Top man.
Pleasure. Take care, mate.
See you, mate.